Alright guys, and we are back with another video, and today we're talking about how Nintendo stays competitive in the next generation race with the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox coming. Is it possible these systems are going to be powerhouses? Is the Nintendo Switch Pro going to be able to keep up with that? And I think in this video you're probably going to get a good idea in terms of how I think and what's going to be going down with it. This is questions that I usually answer quite a bit on PE Live, but I wanted to make sure that I get it out in a dedicated video for you guys. So I will be going over the reported Switch Pro and the Mini and my thoughts on each of those and how it applies to how Nintendo stays competitive with the next systems coming out, and even services like the Apple gaming service, also Google Stadia. Those are going to be factors as well. So let's go ahead and start off with the Nintendo Switch Pro, or what people are dubbing as the Nintendo Switch Pro. So I think that it's very important to realize here, guys, that the Nintendo Switch Pro isn't going to be some type of powerhouse Xbox One X in the palm of your hand or PlayStation 4 Pro in the palm of your hand. I don't think it's even going to be a PlayStation 4 or a regular Xbox One in the palm of your hand. It's going to be a nice bump up, almost like a Nintendo 3DS to new Nintendo 3DS situation. At least that's how Eurogamer is reporting it, and that's how I feel it's going to be, because I think that you can't have it so much more powerful to the point to where it excludes the original base or the Mini that we'll talk about in just a bit when it comes to things. So that's my opinion on the matter when it comes to the power of the system, but I do think that there's going to be some nice improvements that is going to make a difference in current games and also future games coming out as well. But I think the main thing with this Nintendo Switch Pro is that it's going to just have enhanced quality and enhanced feature sets. For example, the durability of the system. I know there were some issues with cracking with some of the other Nintendo Switches out there. I think that they're going to use a different build on it to where that cracking doesn't happen from the back or the top of the Switch system. I think that there's going to be a little bit better CPU in there, so you can get some better frame rates and stuff like that for games. I think that the graphics are going to be enhanced a little bit as well, so maybe you get better or more stable resolutions, higher builds of the resolution, and the dynamic range is not quite as low as what you'd see before on some of the games. I think the RAM can be increased as well, which would help out with the functions of the system too. I think there's going to be potentially Bluetooth put in there, so you can use your Bluetooth headphones on the Nintendo Switch, which would provide potential proper voice chat in there if you can just plug in some Bluetooth headphones and not have to worry about having a cord run all the way to the system when it comes to it. So even if you're playing docked mode, you can have that Bluetooth headset in there for audio and also for voice chat as well. So maybe that's something that they also do add. And I think the screen quality could be a 1080p and better battery life. Some people are saying, oh, well, the 1080p screen might cause the battery to drain too quickly. Well, maybe they put a better battery in there since it's been multiple years since they chose what battery they were going to have in the Nintendo Switch. So these are all things I think that they're going to do or could do, either or, right? They can pick some of this stuff, or it could be all of this stuff, because if you look at the new Nintendo 3DS, that pretty much had an upgrade in everything when it comes to the build quality, when it comes to the screen a little bit, when it comes to the RAM, everything was bumped up, the battery life, everything. So I think that this is a very potential and probable way that Nintendo's going to go going forward in the future. Now, once again, I want to make sure that I say this. I don't think this is going to be some type of powerhouse system that's going to be like $100 more than the current Nintendo Switch. If anything, they might drop the price of the current Nintendo Switch, and they could make this new Switch Pro the normal model of the Nintendo Switch for $300. Or maybe they bump it up $50, and then the Nintendo Switch regular or the OG Nintendo Switch is $300, and then the Nintendo Switch Mini is $250. But I would think that they probably want to get the Nintendo Switch Mini cheaper than that, which we will discuss in a little bit. So one thing that I do want to talk about, which I did mention before in like my original video, but I also want to talk about a little bit more, is that I think now, I guess, is the best time for like a Nintendo Switch Pro, or if they were going to do something like that, because you have some of the biggest and baddest first party games that are coming out this year that could use that extra power, I guess, or you could sell at least people on that concept with stuff like Astral Chain. That game is looking absolutely phenomenal. The graphics in that game, the art style, everything looks good with that. Also a game like Fire Emblem Three Houses, the type of people that like those games and buy those type of games are probably going to be the type of people that go out there and buy a Nintendo Switch Pro. So if you get a Switch Pro out around the same time, I definitely think that it can be a driving factor for those games and people just picking up an extra one or selling off their old one or whatever the case is. So I'm looking forward to seeing when the Nintendo Switch Pro, if it is real of course, does come out. I would think that maybe it'd be a summer release. They did say in the original report when it comes to the Wall Street Journal, it's as early as summer 2019. And in my PE Live videos, we talked about how when the Switch Mini and when the Switch Pro could come out, maybe one comes out, the Mini, in the summer and then the other comes out in the fall. But then again, you might want to have the Pro come out earlier because of Fire Emblem and because of games like Daemon X Machina. Maybe even that game could use it to improve the performance and everything like that. So a lot of the hardcore games that probably aren't going to sell as well as some of the other games that are coming out later in the year are coming out this summer. So I think it might make sense to release it then if it's ready. Obviously, you don't want to release a product before it's ready. So if it's ready, I think it'd be a good idea to have it come out in the summer with these big games. Now let's talk about the Nintendo Switch Mini, kind of shift focus here. Once again, this is all hypothetically speaking. I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about it and kind of answer some questions that I get quite a bit on PE Lives as well. So I think that this is the real factor to where Nintendo stays competitive. It's not with the more expensive price model, it's the cheaper price model. This is something that we've seen throughout the history of most of systems out there. Even if you put out an Xbox One X, even if you put out a PlayStation 4 Pro, the cheaper model still sells better. The cheaper model is always going to sell better because people want that cheap option. Even with like the new Nintendo 2DS XL, that's selling really well because they finally nailed the form factor in terms of making it appealing. Not that cheese wedge with the Nintendo 2DS. So you have the clamshell design, so you have the sleekness of the Nintendo 3DS, but then you also have the price factor of the Nintendo 2DS all built into one. And I think that if they can nail that when it comes to it for children and for kids, this is going to be the real factor in terms of how Nintendo stays competitive. And what I mean by competitive is not getting every single AAA game out there that comes out for the PS4 and the Xbox One or for the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox, because we all know good and well that that's not going to happen. But in terms of sales and getting developers to still make games for the system, and the sales of the system are going to be the big factor here. And I think that this is going to be the system that really takes off when it comes to it, because if you can convert a lot of these Nintendo 3DS owners that are children out there to a more sturdier, better build for children model of the Nintendo Switch, and then you have your cartridges, you have your stuff that you can play, I think that it's going to be a big factor for Nintendo going forward in terms of staying competitive with the sales of the system. And Nintendo wants people to buy multiple Switch systems for a household. Well, if you have 3 kids or 2 to 3 kids, I mean, are they each going to get a Switch that's $300 plus? Probably not. So if you can get that down to $150 to $200, somewhere in that price range, that's going to be a lot better, and you're going to see a lot more kids get into the action here, and parents buy them for their kids, whether it's the birthday or whether it's the holiday season. And especially with Pokemon and also with Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, games like that coming out, big games that sell 4 million units plus with Luigi's Mansion, but then 10 million units plus with Animal Crossing and also Pokemon, it makes sense to release a cheaper, smaller unit out there that's going to be more durable. Some people have even suggested maybe it's a clamshell design. I know with the Wall Street Journal, they suggested that it's going to be more like the PS Vita, so it's going to remove several features. Also, Eurogamer said that as well. That's how it's going to be cheaper. They're going to remove several features from the system. So stuff like the HD Rumble and the Joy-Cons, I think it's going to be like a system that's all connected, so you're not going to have the detachable Joy-Cons. Some even suggested that it won't be able to dock at all. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but I do feel that Nintendo is going to try to gut this system down to where it is going to be in the $150 to $200 price range. I think $250 is a little too expensive because that's where the Nintendo 3DS was, and it was hard getting kids originally to jump onto that. So it definitely needs to be somewhere within the $150 to $200 price range, and I think that they're going to do that. One of the concerns that I've heard people talk about is the Joy-Cons and saying, oh, well, we won't be able to use Joy-Cons at all. No, that's not the case. You just won't be able to have Joy-Cons with the system itself. I think you'll still be able to take a Joy-Con and connect it to the system and use it as a controller. So I do think that if you look at it with the Nintendo Switch Mini, if they can get this into that price range, and of course they have the software to back up that price range and to back up people buying multiple ones in their house, that is going to be the biggest factor for Nintendo going forward and staying competitive, in my opinion, is of course having great software. Nintendo's always going to push out amazing games, and with this generation, which is unique to any other generation that Nintendo's had, this is the first time in Nintendo history that they've literally been focused on one machine outside of the original NES before the Game Boy came out. Once the Game Boy came out, then they were focused on two, but Nintendo now has this unique position to where they really can make all of their games and get like the best of both worlds when it comes to portable gaming and when it comes to home console gaming, because they have a hybrid. Before, they've always had multiple systems where they had to make games that were completely different, and it separates their development teams. Now everything is together when it comes to it with the Switch, and they can put the full force of their games out on their one system, and you're seeing the benefits of that right here with having a hybrid system. With the amount of games that we've already gotten in the first 2 years plus of the Nintendo Switch, it's been absolutely phenomenal. Big games are coming out all the time, and we're finally getting a home console quote-unquote version of Pokemon, in addition to games that were portable only in the past generation like Fire Emblem or Animal Crossing. Now we're getting those on a home console where we can play in the style that we want, and also at home on the big screen. So to me, it makes sense in terms of what's going on, and if they did make a portable only Nintendo Switch version of that and got it cheaper, that would definitely be something that would extend the life of the Switch well beyond what people were thinking, which some, not all, but some were thinking, oh, well, once the next generation with the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox come, Switch is going to be cooked. But that is not the case, and we're seeing that the Switch is actually excelling because of the software, and I think that this is what ties all this in together, is the software. You're going to have software that's Nintendo Switch Pro enhanced, I would guess. You're going to have software that's really fit for playing portable, and people have options. Consumers have options, and that's exactly what people want, is options for their stuff, as long as it makes sense. So those are my thoughts when it comes to what's going on with the next generation and everything. But I feel that with Pokemon and with the Nintendo Switch Mini, this is really what's going to be the key for the Nintendo Switch going forward and staying competitive, because Pokemon and Animal Crossing and those type of games are going to sell the Nintendo Switch Mini and the Nintendo Switch in general for years to come. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. Those two games are going to be big for Nintendo, because those are exclusives that you can only get on the Nintendo Switch, and they're proven commodities that sell big time. And we already saw that with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee selling 10 million units in like a couple months or whatever it was. No, a month and a half, it sold 10 million units plus, and that wasn't even the mainline Pokemon that we're used to. This one, Sword and Shield, is going to do a lot better than that 10 million in a month and a half and sell a lot more systems, in my opinion. So what do you guys think about my thoughts here when it comes to Nintendo Switch Pro and the Nintendo Switch Mini? Give me your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Go ahead and check out the links in the description below. We got Facebook and Twitter. Go ahead and give us a like and a follow on our social media. Really helps to spread the content of PlayerEssence across the internet in addition to YouTube. Also, make sure you check out our Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube live gaming pages. Hit that like button if you did like this video. Let me know you guys want more content like this going forward in the future. And subscribe to PlayerEssence for latest RPG, Japanese, and Nintendo gaming news. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.